The Peter and Paul Fortress is the original citadel of St. Petersburg, Russia, founded by Peter the Great in 1703 and built to Domenico Trezzini's designs from 1706 to 1740. In the early 1920s, it was still used as a prison and execution ground by the Bolshevik government. Today it has been adapted as the central and most important part of the State Museum of St. Petersburg history. The museum has gradually become virtually the sole owner of the fortress building, except the structure occupied by the St. Petersburg Mint, Monetny Dvor. The fortress contains several notable buildings clustered around the Peter and Paul Cathedral, 1712 to 1733, which has a 122.5 meters bell tower, the tallest in the city center, and a gilded angel-topped cupola. The cathedral is the burial place of all Russian Tsars from Peter I to Alexander III, with the exception of Peter II and Ivan VI. The remains of Nicholas II and his family and entourage were reinterred there, in the side chapel of St. Catherine, on July 17, 1998, the 80th anniversary of their deaths. Toward the end of 2006, the remains of Dowager Empress Maria Feodorovna were brought from Roskilde Cathedral outside Copenhagen and reinterred next to her husband, Alexander III. The newer Grand Ducal Mausoleum, built in the neo-Baroque style under Leon Benoz's supervision in 1896 to 1908, is connected to the cathedral by a corridor. It was constructed in order to remove the remains of some of the non-reigning Romanovs from the cathedral, where there was scarcely any room for new burials. The mausoleum was expected to hold up to 60 tombs, but by the time of the Russian Revolution, there were 13. The latest burial was of Nicholas II's first cousin once removed, Grand Duke Vladimir Cyrilovich, 1992. The remains of his parents, Grand Duke Cyril Vladimirovich and his wife Victoria Fyodorovna, were transferred to the mausoleum from Coburg in 1995. Other structures inside the fortress include the still functioning Mint building, the Trubetskoy Bastion with its grim prison cells, and the City Museum. According to a centuries-old tradition, a cannon is fired each noon from the Naryshkin Bastion. Annual celebrations of the City Day are normally centered on the island where the city was born. The fortress walls overlook sandy beaches that have become among the most popular in St. Petersburg. In summer, the beach is often overcrowded, especially when a major sand festival takes place on the shore.
The Putorana Plateau or the Putorana Mountains is a high-lying basalt plateau, a mountainous area at the northwestern edge of the Central Siberian Plateau, to the south from Taimur Peninsula. The highest mountain in the range is Mount Kayman, which stands 1,700 meters above sea level. The plateau is composed of Siberian traps. The nearest large settlement is the closed city of Norilsk. The area contains some of the largest known nickel deposits in the world. Russia's geographical center, Lake Vivi, is situated on the plateau, as is the Talnikovy waterfall, touted as the highest waterfall in Asia. The lakes such as the Dyupkin are large, and form whole ecosystems, which spread over many tens of kilometers. Putorana is from the native language of the Evenks, and translates to the country of lakes with steep banks. The more than 25,000 lakes are between 180 and 420 meters deep, and together they form the second largest store of fresh water in Russia by capacity after Lake Baikal. The Putorana Nature Reserve, established in 1988 and administered from Norilsk, covers some 1,887,251 hectares, 4,663,500 acres, with a buffer zone of 1,773,300 hectares, 4,382,000 acres. It was set up to protect the world's largest herd of reindeer, as well as snow sheep. In July 2010, the Putorana Reserve was inscribed on the World Heritage List as a complete set of subarctic and Arctic ecosystems in an isolated mountain range, including pristine taiga, forest tundra and Arctic desert systems, as well as untouched cold water lake and river systems.
Red Square is a city square in Moscow, Russia. It separates the Kremlin, the former royal citadel and currently the official residence of the President of Russia, from a historic merchant quarter known as Kitay-Gorod. Red Square is often considered the central square of Moscow since Moscow's major streets, which connect to Russia's major highways, originate from the square. The rich history of Red Square is reflected in many paintings by Vasily Surikov, Konstantin Yuan and others. The square was meant to serve as Moscow's main marketplace. It was also the site of various public ceremonies and proclamations, and occasionally a coronation for Russia's czars would take place. The square has been gradually built up since that point and has been used for official ceremonies by all Russian governments since it was established. The buildings surrounding the square are all significant in some respect. Lenin's mausoleum, for example, contains the embalmed body of Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, the founder of the Soviet Union. Nearby to the south is the elaborate brightly domed St. Basil's Cathedral and the palaces and cathedrals of the Kremlin. On the eastern side of the square is the GUM department store, and next to it the restored Kazan Cathedral. The northern side is occupied by the State Historical Museum, whose outlines echo those of Kremlin towers. The Iberian Gate and Chapel have been rebuilt to the northwest. Previously, the flags of the Soviet republics were flown there until 1987. The flagpoles were then removed in the late 1990s. The only sculptured monument on the square is a bronze statue of Kuzma Minin and Dmitry Pozarsky, who helped to clear Moscow from the Polish invaders in 1612, during the time of troubles. Nearby is the so-called Lobnoe Mesto, a circular platform where public ceremonies used to take place. Both the Minin and Pozarsky statue and the Lobnoe Mesto were once located more centrally in Red Square but were moved to their current locations to facilitate the large military parades of the Soviet era. The square itself is around 330 meters long and 70 meters wide. The Kremlin and Red Square were together recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1990, due to their inextricable links to Russian history since the 13th century.
The Cathedral of Vasily the Blessed, commonly known as St. Basil's Cathedral, is a church in the Red Square in Moscow, Russia. The building, now a museum, is officially known as the Cathedral of the Intercession of the Most Holy Theotokos on the Moat. It was built from 1555 to 61 on orders from Ivan the Terrible and commemorates the capture of Kazan and Astrakhan. A world-famous landmark, it was the city's tallest building until the completion of the Ivan the Great Bell Tower in 1600. The original building, known as Trinity Church and later Trinity Cathedral, contained 8 side churches arranged around the 9th, central church of intercession. The 10th church was erected in 1588 over the grave of venerated local Saint Vasily, Basil. In the 16th and 17th centuries, the church, perceived as the earthly symbol of the heavenly city, as happens to all churches in Byzantine Christianity, was popularly known as the Jerusalem and served as an allegory of the Jerusalem Temple and the annual Palm Sunday parade attended by the Patriarch of Moscow and the Tsar. The building is shaped as a flame of a bonfire rising into the sky, a design that has no parallel in Russian architecture. Dmitry Shvitkovsky, in his book Russian Architecture and the West, states that it is like no other Russian building. Nothing similar can be found in the entire millennium of Byzantine tradition from the 5th to the 15th century, a strangeness that astonishes by its unexpectedness, complexity and dazzling interleaving of the manifold details of its design. The cathedral foreshadowed the climax of Russian national architecture in the 17th century. As part of the program of state atheism, the church was confiscated from the Russian Orthodox community as part of the Soviet Union's anti-theist campaigns and has operated as a division of the State Historical Museum since 1928. It was completely secularized in 1929 and remains a federal property of the Russian Federation. The church has been part of the Moscow Kremlin and Red Square UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1990. It is not actually within the Kremlin, but often served as a visual metonym for Russia in Western media throughout the Cold War.
The Solovetsky Islands are an archipelago located in the Onega Bay of the White Sea, Russia. As an administrative division, the islands are incorporated as Solovetsky District of Arkhangelsk Oblast, Russia. Within the framework of municipal divisions, they are incorporated as Solovetskoye Rural Settlement within Primorsky Municipal District. The administrative center of both divisions is the settlement of Solovetsky, located on Bolshoy Solovetsky Island. Almost all of the population of the islands lives in Solovetsky. As of the 2010 census, the population of the district was 861 inhabitants. The archipelago has a total area of 347 square kilometers and consists of 6 islands. The islands separate the Onega Bay from the main volume of the White Sea. The closest mainland is the Onega Peninsula. The shores of the islands are very indented. They are formed of granites and gneiss. The relief of the islands is hilly. The highest point is 107 meters. Most of the Solovetsky Islands are covered with Scots pine and Norway spruce forests, which are partially swampy. There are numerous lakes, which were joined by monks so as to form a network of canals. One interesting feature of these islands is stone labyrinths and other stone settings, especially the stone labyrinths of Bolshoy-Zayatsky Island. Such labyrinths were typical for Northern Europe, but most have perished, and now Solovetsky Islands have some of the best remaining examples. Historically, the islands have been the setting of the famous Russian Orthodox Solovetsky Monastery complex. It was founded in the second quarter of the 15th century by 2 monks from the Kirillo-Belozersky Monastery. By the end of the 16th century, the abbey had emerged as one of the wealthiest landowners and most influential religious centers in Russia. In 1974, the Solovetsky Islands were designated a historical, an architectural museum and a natural reserve of the Soviet Union. In 1992, they were inscribed on the World Heritage List as an outstanding example of a monastic settlement in the inhospitable environment of Northern Europe, which admirably illustrates the faith, tenacity, and enterprise of later medieval religious communities. Today, the Solovki are seen as one of the major tourist magnets in the orbit of the Russian North.
Suzdal is a town in the administrative center of Suzdalsky district in Vladimir Oblast, Russia, located on the Kamchatka River, 26 kilometers north of the city of Vladimir, the administrative center of the oblast. Suzdal is one of the oldest Russian towns. In the 12th century it became the capital of the principality, with Moscow being merely one of its subordinate settlements. The town's history dates back to 1024 and in 1125 Yuri Dolgoruki made Suzdal the capital of the Rostov-Suzdal Principality. Suzdal began to function as a capital at the time when Moscow was still a cluster of cowsheds. In 1157 Andrei Bogolyubsky moved the capital from Suzdal to Vladimir, from which time the principality was known as Vladimir Suzdal. Set in a fertile wheat-growing area, Suzdal remained a trade center even after Mongol-led invasions. Eventually, it united with Nizhny Novgorod until both were annexed by Moscow in 1392. In 1864, local merchants failed to coerce the government into building the Trans-Siberian Railway through their town. Instead it went through Vladimir, 35 kilometers away. As a result, Suzdal was bypassed not only by trains, but by the 20th century altogether. Furthermore, in 1967 Suzdal earned a federally protected status, which officially limited the development in the area. That is why the place remains largely the same as ages ago, its cute wooden cottages mingling with golden cupolas that reflect in the river Kamchatka, which meanders sleepily through gentle hills and flower-filled meadows. Today, the town operates as an important tourist center, featuring many fine examples of old Russian architecture, most of them churches and monasteries. This juxtaposition of stunning medieval architecture with its pastoral setting lends Suzdal a picturesque charm, and in the summer, artists and easels are a common sight. The only industry in the town is tourism. Suzdal avoided the industrialization of the Soviet times and was able to preserve a great number of stunning examples of the Russian architecture of the 13th–19th century. There are 305 monuments and listed buildings in Suzdal, including 30 churches, 14 bell towers and 5 monasteries and convents. 79 of them are federally protected buildings and 167 are regionally protected. In 1992, 2 of the monuments, Savior Monastery of St. Eutymius and Kremlin with Nativity of the Virgin Cathedral, were included in the UNESCO World Heritage List, together with 6 other white monuments in this region.
Ubsunur Hollow is a fragile mountain in Ubsunur Hollow located on the territorial border of Mongolia and the Republic of Tver in the Russian Federation, named after Uvs Lake, a large, shallow and very saline lake in the basin's center. Several smaller lakes are scattered throughout. It is part of a combination of raised lands and hollows located throughout the Tanuol and Altai mountainous regions. Here, the world's most northern desert meets the northern hemisphere's most southern tundra zone. The Ubsunur Hollow was inscribed on the World Heritage Site in 2003. The total area of Uvs Lake drainage basin is 70,000 square kilometers. Ubsunur Hollow's importance lies chiefly in its cultural heritage, and it is the most important place in Central Asia for its concentration of unstudied archaeological artifacts, especially its burial mounds, rock carvings, and stone sculptures, which are remnants of medieval settlements and Buddhist temples. There are as many as 20,000 burial mounds, many of them being older than the Egyptian pyramids. Ubsunur Hollow was nominated as a World Heritage Site in 1995 as one of the largest intact watersheds in Central Asia, where 40,000 archaeological sites can be found from historically famous nomadic tribes such as the Scythians, the Turks and the Huns. The hollow is located on the border between Mongolia and Russia and has an area of just over 10,000 square kilometers. The terrain encompasses a wide variation of climates, including glaciers, alpine tundra, subalpine meadows, and vast mountain taiga areas. There are also forested steppes, treeless steppes, semi-arid deserts, and ever-shifting sand dunes. It is a scenic and highly diversified natural habitat. Due to its location on the cusp of the Siberian and Central Asian Mongolian terrains, the flora and fauna of the hollow exhibit a high biodiversity for many latitudes. Animal species that inhabit both mountains and tundra, such as the Siberian roe deer and Altai snowcock, flourish here. The endangered snow leopard is also present, as well as taiga dwellers such as the Caspian red deer, lynx and wolverine. Steppe dwellers include the Mongolian lark, demoiselle crane and long-tailed Siberian squirrel. Desert inhabitants include the bustard and midday gerbil. The bird species alone number some 359. Since the hollow is a protected area, many ancient species extinct in other regions have found refuge here.
The Valley of Geysers is a geyser field on Kamchatka Peninsula, Russia, and has the second largest concentration of geysers in the world. This 6 kilometers long basin with approximately 90 geysers and many hot springs is situated on the Kamchatka Peninsula in the Russian Far East, predominantly on the left bank of the ever-deepening Geysernaya River, into which geothermal waters flow from a relatively young stratovolcano, Kikpanich. It is part of the Kronotsky Nature Reserve, which, in turn, is incorporated into the World Heritage Site Volcanoes of Kamchatka. The valley is difficult to reach, with helicopters providing the only feasible means of transport. The pulsating geysers of Kamchatka were discovered by a local scientist, Tatiana Ustinova, in 1941. She published her findings 14 years later, but there was little exploration of the area until 1972. A systematic survey was undertaken in the mid-1970s, and an automatic monitoring system was introduced in 1990. Over 30 geysers were given names. Among these was the Giant Geyser, capable of producing a jet of water reaching up to 40 meters. From the 1980s, the area was promoted across the USSR as one of the tourist magnets of Kamchatka in the Russian Far East. Foreign tourists were allowed into the valley in 1991. About 3,000 tourists visited the site annually. On June 3, 2007, a massive mudflow inundated two-thirds of the valley. Oleg Mitchell of Russia Service for the Oversight of Natural Resources said, "We witnessed a unique natural event, but the consequences of such a natural catastrophe are irreversible." The World Heritage Site also expressed its deep concern over the issue. "This is tragic for humankind, in that we have lost one of the great natural wonders of the world," the World Wildlife Fund spokesman commented. On June 5, it was reported that a thermal lake was forming above the valley. The landslide occurred while the documentary Wild Russia was filmed. It features footage of before and after the disaster. The extent of permanent change is not yet clear, but may be less than was originally thought. As of June 9, 2007, waters have receded somewhat, exposing some of the submerged features. Velikan Geyser, one of the field's largest, was not buried in the slide and has recently been observed to be active.
The volcanoes of Kamchatka are a large group of volcanoes situated on the Kamchatka Peninsula. The Kamchatka River and the surrounding central side valley are flanked by large volcanic belts containing around 160 volcanoes, 29 of them still active. The peninsula has a high density of volcanoes and associated volcanic phenomena, with 29 active volcanoes being included in the 6 UNESCO World Heritage List sites in the Volcanoes of Kamchatka group, most of them on the Kamchatka Peninsula. The highest volcano is Klyushevskaya Sopka, 4,750 meters, the largest active volcano in the Northern Hemisphere, while the most striking is Kranotsky, whose perfect cone was said by celebrated volcanologists Robert and Barbara Decker to be a prime candidate for the world's most beautiful volcano. Somewhat more accessible are the 3 volcanoes visible from Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, Koryaksky, Avachinsky, and Kozelsky. In the center of Kamchatka is Eurasia's world-famous Geyser Valley, which was partly destroyed by a massive mudslide in June 2007. Owing to the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench, deep-focus seismic events and tsunamis are fairly common. A pair of megathrust earthquakes occurred off the coast on October 16, 1737, and on November 4, 1952, in the magnitude of 9.3 and 8.2 respectively. A chain of more shallow earthquakes were recorded as recently as April 2006. Wrangel Island is an island in the Arctic Ocean, between the Chukchi Sea and East Siberian Sea. Wrangel Island lies astride the 180 degrees meridian. The international date line is displaced eastwards at this latitude to avoid the island as well as the Chukchi Peninsula on the Russian mainland. The closest land to Wrangel Island is the tiny and rocky Herald Island located 60 kilometers to the east. The distance to the closest point on the mainland is 140 kilometers. Wrangel Island may have been the last place on Earth where mammoths survived. Most of Wrangel Island, and Herald Island, is a federally protected nature sanctuary administered by Russia's Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment. The island, and its surrounding waters, were classified as a zapovnik, a strict nature reserve, in 1976 and, as such, receive the highest level of protection and exclude practically all human activity other than for scientific purposes. The Chukotka regional government extended the marine protected area out to 24 nautical miles in 1999. As of 2003, there were 4 rangers who reside on the island year-round. In addition, a core group of about 12 scientists conduct research during the summer months. Wrangel Island is about 125 kilometers wide and 7,600 square kilometers in area. It consists of a southern coastal plain that is as wide as 15 kilometers, a central belt of low-relief mountains, and a northern coastal plain that is as wide as 25 kilometers. The east-west trending central mountain belt, the Tsentralny mountain range, is as much as 40 kilometers wide and 145 kilometers long from coast to coast. Typically, The mountains are a little over 500 meters above mean sea level. The highest mountain on this island is Solovetsky Mountain with an elevation of 1,096 meters above mean sea level. The east-west trending mountain range terminates at sea cliffs at either end of the island. Wrangel Island belongs administratively to the Chukotka Autonomous Okrug of the Russian Federation. This rocky island has a weather station and, formerly, two Chukchi fishing settlements on the southern side of the island and Zvyazny on the shore of Somnilnaya Bay.
Yaroslavl is a city in the administrative center of Yaroslavl Oblast, Russia, located 250 kilometers northeast of Moscow. The historic part of the city, a World Heritage Site, is located at the confluence of the Volga and the Kotorasl rivers. It is one of the Golden Ring cities, a group of historic cities northeast of Moscow, that have played an important role in Russian history. Yaroslavl is one of the 8 cities of Russia's Golden Ring, a group of touristic historic towns around Moscow. Yaroslavl is situated on the northeastern side of this ring, and is the largest city in its chain. Whilst the city is best known for its architectural merits, it also has a relatively large repertoire of cultural attractions. Despite the effects of the Russian Civil War, and a number of air raids during World War II, the city of Yaroslavl has managed to retain a great deal of its 17th, 18th and 19th century urban substance. This has helped make the city recognizable as a monument to the architectural development and style of the Russian Tsardom. The center of the city, which covers an area of around 600 hectares, has around 140 individual federally protected architectural monuments. Since 2005, this ensemble, along with the Spaso-Preobrazhensky Monastery, has been included on the list of UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Despite all this, there are a number of buildings of architectural merit which are located outside of the city center. The old town is effectively triangular in shape. This triangle is formed by the natural border provided to the south and east by the Kotorasl and Volga rivers, and on the land side by the geometric pattern of the street plan, which dates from the 18th and 19th centuries. Constructed in 1506-1516 on the foundations of the original edifice dating back to 1216-1224. In the 16th century, the first stone wall is built around the monastery. In 1787, the monastery was closed and converted into a residence of the Yaroslavl and Rostov bishops. At that time, monastery buildings began to be reconstructed. New cells in the prior's chambers were built. Yaroslavl has 3 theaters, the most famous of which is the Volkov Theater, an institution which since 1911 has been housed in a large neoclassical building in the city's old town,